So the Industry Monitor went live last Monday, and I'm here to talk you through the presentation in terms of showing some of the highlights from the monitor and what it looks like. If you're sitting towards the back, you will have got a paper copy in case I thought you weren't able to see some of the detail on the screen, but you can also jump online afterwards and have a look at it. So I led this, but with a cross-project team from our branch. So Crystal Robertson, Renee Chastowski and Matt Horn, I think, are all here. And they're the ones who put all of the indicators together. And if you're involved in consultation, you probably spoke to one of them as well. All right, so the Industry Monitor tracks Australia's progress in areas set out in the department's strategic plan. And it brings together information about the economic performance of Australia, our performance in innovation and science, and how the operating environment for businesses is performing, and pulls it together into a set of indicators that help us understand how Australia is performing over time and how we're performing compared to some of our other competitors around the world. And it gives us a sense of the bigger picture about what's happening in the world and in our economy and the factors that are influencing that. So through examining domestic factors and international factors, it provides a consolidated set of information about the environment that the department is operating in. Most of the indicators are not things that our department is directly responsible for, though. They just give us a sense of the world we're in and the things that are actually affecting the department's activities. So we published the monitor for the first time last year, and this is the second now, and it'll be an annual publication produced probably around this time every year. And in doing it, we are the sort of owners of it, but we do it with lots of areas of the department, including PSP, Science, Policy Division, Office of the Chief Scientist, and we've been talking to corporate as well, because some of these indicators from the monitor directly feed into our corporate plan and our portfolio budget statement too. So I'm going to go through some of the results online today. So we have an interactive version and we have a PDF version, and so I'll show you some of the PDF versions, or you can look at them on your iPad as well. So let me start with a couple of things that have changed this year. So we've improved some of the graphics and things like that. We've also introduced two new comparison countries, which are the New Zealand and Japan, because we looked at the list of comparison countries and we thought actually both of those countries are pretty important competitors for us. And we switched around a few of the indicators. So let me talk you through that as well. So this year we looked at every indicator from last year and we went through a process of analysing, is this the best possible indicator to get at what we're measuring here? So on the left-hand side is the ones we switched out. There were 11 of them, and mostly we switched in something very similar, but something that we thought was actually more robust, had a more reliable data set, or was more up to date, because some of these things we realised weren't actually published every year. We also introduced two new ones, which are the growth centres and the business use of digital technology, because they're things that are now within our portfolio, so we thought it was important to reflect them as well. And so there's 32 indicators in total, and together they present a whole sort of picture about the things that are influencing the department at the moment. Okay, on to what the monitor looks like. So that was going to work. Okay. So this is the Industry Monitor 2016, and it has 3 sections. So we've condensed 4 sections last year into 3 sections, which are competitiveness, innovation and science, and the business environment. So I'm going to start with some of the competitiveness measures. So first of all, looking at Australia's economic growth. So here you can look at Australia's GDP performance compared to our major competitors. And what's interesting to note actually is that over the last year, Australia's had a few countries who have actually outperformed us. So New Zealand, the UK, Canada and the United States have all actually had stronger GDP growth than Australia. Now we're still performing above this OECD average and above the Euro area average, but it does suggest that in fact some of the countries around the world are catching up, and that's something for us to be aware of. Something else that's happening is a lot of countries at the moment are struggling in terms of their productivity results, and Australia is definitely one of those, but it's a common problem at the moment. So if you look at these blue bars, over the last year, a lot of countries have actually gone backwards in terms of their multi-factor productivity performance. And that's something which we definitely think is concern. We think it's reflecting the fact that at the moment, in terms of our level of investment, it's not matching our level of output, and it's something we really need to improve, and is a a sign that, we need to think about some new reforms and some bigger reforms to turn that around. Now, something we added this year is looking at Australia's exchange rate, because that has a big impact on our competitiveness. And what you can see is over the last few years, Australia has had a much higher effective exchange rate than most of our competitors. And now, post-mining boom, it is starting to come back down, and that's really good. It's going to be helping our trade-exposed industries like education and tourism to be able to compete with some of these other countries. Now, if you look at our competitiveness rankings overall, we have two things that we've got in this one, and they're the Institute for Management Development and the World Economic Forum. And on both of those, we've probably slipped about a place, and this is probably reflects that, in fact, other countries have caught up a little bit. But it means we're going to need to keep aware of that and keep pushing really hard to make sure that we're not slipping compared to other countries around the world in terms of our overall competitiveness. Now, when you look at our business environment, one thing that has been a challenge for Australia recently is our level of business investment growth. So post-GFC, Australian businesses are struggling a little bit with confidence and investing new money, and we haven't seen that same level of investment that we did in the past. And if you look, since 2013, this has actually been negative, so it's been declining. So that's something where we're going to want to put those sort of conditions in place that make Australian businesses confident about their ability to invest. And if you look at business profitability, this one's interesting. So this slide splits up profitability of Australian businesses by the major sort of sectors of the economy. And what you can see here is that people talk about the investment boom, the mining boom being over, but mining is still a really large part of Australia's business profitability. Because if you drop mining out of it, you can see that first of all, it's much lower, and second of all, it's more stable. Mining tends to have big profitabilities, but they're also very volatile and fluctuate a lot. So that's still, a significant area for the Australian economy. So in order to be able to continue to improve Australia's performance, there's a whole lot of things we look at in terms of what we can do there. One thing you can look at is how easy it is to do business in Australia. So these are the World Bank Ease of Doing Business indicators, and they have a whole lot of measures in terms of how easy it is to do business in Australia. And the good news is that Australia is going pretty well, and if you look at our 2012 and our 2016 results, we're pretty stable actually. There's a little bit of movement around the edges, but overall we're good. And our overall ranking is actually improved to 13th out of 189 countries, and that's up 2 places from 15th in 2012, the last time this was measured. So what you might also want to look at is how does Australia go in terms of its support for research and development and innovation? So many of you might know that Australia struggles a little bit in terms of its R&D performance compared to some of the other countries around the world. And if you look at these grey bars, that's the total amount, and Australia is definitely not leading the pack there. What's interesting is you can break it down into the components. So when you look at our investment in higher education, actually we're doing pretty well compared to our competitors. But when you look at our performance compared to government, or in particular our performance for business R&D, that's where we're below the average, and we've probably got some room to improve there. We've also got innovation indicators in there. Let's scroll down. So overall, Australian businesses are actually innovative, and the proportion of firms that are innovation active for both large businesses and for small businesses is a bit above the OECD average. But what we know is that Australian firms are pretty good at introducing innovations which are new to another business in their industry, but we're not as good as doing those new to market innovations, those really novel ones. And in fact, on that measure, we rank 24th out of 30 OECD countries. So that's not great. We can do something to improve there. And you might know as well that Australian businesses are not great at collaborating. So when we've got 2 measures here, the first one is innovation collaboration with other firms, and both for large and small firms compared to the OECD average, and when you look at the best performers in the OECD, we've got some real room to improve there. And the stats look even worse when you look at the businesses collaborating with research institutions. So that's where you can see that for both large and small firms, we're well below the average, and we're a long way from being the top performers in this space. So I want to show you some of our science measures as well. So something that we added in this year is the number and value of research contracts, consultancies, and collaborations entered into by our research institutions. And the good news is that on both the number of these activities and the value of them, we have been improving every year. And these indicators are actually a bit more recent than the innovation statistics that I just showed you. So what we'll hope to see in the next few years is that as some of this stuff flows through, we can see some better indicators in our innovation performance. It's also important to look at what's happening in terms of science and technology. And this is, we added in the number of qualifications for science and technology fields, so the STEM fields this year. And the good news is that in most of these areas, the number of graduates in these fields are actually growing faster than the average. So that means, we're getting more graduates coming through that have got these types of qualifications, which is really encouraging. So the last one I'll show you is another one we added this year, is the performance of the digital economy in Australia. Now this one is one of those ones where it's really tricky to get data on actually. So we couldn't find a source for looking at an international comparison, and I think our digital economy people here have been working on that. But what we can show you is the performance of Australian businesses and how they're actually using digital technology. So probably unsurprisingly, in terms of their web presence, how much they're using social media, every year their performance is getting better, and the proportion of businesses that are using these things is improving. And the latest result that we've got is for 2013-14. I'm sure that once we get the next couple of years, you'll start to see those numbers really ramp up as well. Okay, so that is a little snapshot about some of the indicators in the report, and you can go and look at them all online if you want to have a look at them in more detail. What does it mean? Well, firstly, it was really encouraging to see that last year the industry monitor was downloaded more than 20,000 times. So that means there's probably a demand, and people like having information presented in this sort of way. And the surprising thing for something that appears so simple is that it was really tricky to put together actually, to go through each indicator and decide, yep, this is the best indicator we can use, and then to distill what we want to say about that indicator into a few little paragraphs and present it in a really clean visual way. That's quite tricky, but I think there is really value in doing that and bringing it all together to sit in the one consolidated information source. And overall, the results are really good. Australia continues to have 25 years of economic growth. Our performance is strong. But that being said, mostly the indicators, our performance is about the same as last year. There wasn't any where I thought, wow, that's really changed in the last 12 months. And so that sends us a signal that we're probably going to have to keep looking at areas where we can improve. And the monitor is useful in that way, and it tells us sort of how we're tracking, where we might need to focus more of our attention, where we've actually been doing some initiatives that are working really well. And so it's a useful document to sort of give us the context of the operating environment that we're in and the things that could be affecting the department's activities and our programs. So the other thing that we are still going to be thinking about next year is making sure that we've still got the best possible indicators for this. And there's a couple of areas where we're not intending to change as many indicators again, but one or two where we still think we want to make sure that we're using the best possible data source, the most up-to-date data source, and the most accurate data source, because that's really important when you're actually trying to get a great measure of your performance. So in terms of how this report works, you can actually go online and download any of the data behind any of the charts as well. So part of the reason probably why this is a bit tricky to get up online is for every single chart you can download the full CSV file behind it, and you can come and talk to us if you want to use it as well, but it's all there and made publicly available. Although I will say wait a day or two, because that's where we're having some of the issues with the bugs with some of the CSV files. So if you want tomorrow, just come and contact us and we'll give you the actually correct file and make sure there's no issues with it there. And what's encouraging is now since last Monday, this report has already been downloaded more than 1,000 times, which is really great news. And we're hoping that lots of people can actually use this document in their work and find it useful and can incorporate it into other things that they're doing. And we're happy to help out if we can and talk you through what we did and how we did it.